And that leads me to Mike, my next person to put on the spot. Um, I just wanted to hear a bit about your mental wellness journey before, during, and after, and how you're using that, like your voice to remove the stigma. So I actually like know Mike through Facebook, and I've done like some volunteerism with his wife, but he really inspired. He was one of the first people to ask for the topic of this show. Um, and he does a lot of like reaching out and being active in the social media world, but also in real life, like just using systems to I guess create change. Like I've just been inspired with Mike for the last couple years, watching him do local campaigns, watching you use your voice. So Mike, I want to hear a little bit about you and how you've used your voice and how you think people can kind of remove those stigmas and live their lives with mental, wellness.
Okay, well, thank you. So, as I had mentioned, I think I lived a long time undiagnosed with uh, depression and anxiety. And uh, prior to COVID-19, that stigma nearly actually, I say it nearly killed me because I actively had a plan for suicide at one point, at more than one point actually. But and even though there's obviously something wrong at that point, that stigma was still preventing me from admitting it to myself that, hey, I've got to reach out and get some help. And there's something really wrong here that's making me do this. But I'd wake up the next day and that problem would no longer exist. So I'd move on to the next, my next challenge, which would be work or dealing something with something like, with my kids or family. And until that next episode occurred, it was a vicious cycle. And it eventually got to where I was like working an excessive amount of hours and not really recognizing those boundaries that I needed to set with myself because of these mental health issues. I was getting less than 10 hours of sleep a week because I was working overnights and trying to burn the candle at both ends, being a father, a husband, and then going to work and living on caffeine pretty much. And then what I realized the hard way is that with something like anxiety, you can feel like everything is okay until it's not. And then I had a massive anxiety attack. I thought I was having a heart attack, and that's how I ended up at the hospital. And that's when I was diagnosed with the anxiety. And I didn't really realize the true power of like just talking about it until I went to speak to one of the psychiatric nurses there. And just that first conversation, I remember feeling like, there's a weight lifted off my shoulders because I finally said something. And I'm also diabetic, which actually played to my advantage for once in my life because ADEC has a social worker on site. So I was really, really lucky to have quick access to therapy, which so many people don't have. And I was able to get in there and go through CBT, which again was another eye opener for me to see how much, going through those steps, kind of relearning things about yourself that you've neglected all these years or that I had neglected because I was ignoring the problems. So I went through that therapy, helped me grow. And then uh, another thing I quickly realized is that like even though you went through therapy and kind of talked about it with somebody, it doesn't mean that your condition doesn't evolve as you evolve. So like I went through another round of therapy and learned more about myself at that point. So all of these lessons kind of really taught me how important it is to talk about it because even if you have went through some sort of therapy and got help, that doesn't mean your problem goes away. You could have a relapse into depression and anxiety. And to me, it was harder to reach out the second time and say like, because I was telling myself I should be over this. I've got the help. I've went through therapy. I felt so good when I was done it, but it is, you know, uh, it's there and you're fine until you're not with something like anxiety and depression. And one of the things I tried to tell people is that you forget how bad the bad days are until like as you're going through the good days, like life is great, and then a bad day hits you. And when it hits you, it doesn't just hit you. Sometimes it knocks you just right off your feet, and you're stuck in your bed all day, and like you're beating yourself up for being there. But so I went through all those journeys, and that's kind of like what made me so vocal about it, because I know other people that are just like me, and they're suffering with well, in silence, without really feeling like they're able to speak out about it, or comfortable to speak out about it. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I've tried to make myself available to friends to let them know, like, you're not alone. I've went through this, and even reaching out on social media is, a lot of people think like you're just reaching out on Messenger or something like that, but sometimes just a couple kind words to someone that's having a tough day goes such a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was before COVID-19. I was just focusing on that, and kind of keeping in touch with everyone that I knew, that had these challenges. But then once COVID-19 hit, um, I similar to Tasha and Konica, how they mentioned, like, you gotta shift that, like, to family life kind of thing. I had to do that too, because I was home with my kids, and my daughter actually has uh, anxiety too. So pulling her from the classroom and bringing her home and explaining that to her was a bit of a challenge, and it was also another lesson for me, because, like, with her anxiety, I had went through therapy twice at that point, and even though I had those lessons that I had learned and I still had the material at hand, explaining anxiety and what it meant to me was completely different. Trying to explain it to her and what it meant to her, because of the age difference, and her experience, and even with friends, like, explaining what my anxiety was to them. There's always a little bit of a barrier there, but it's it gave me an understanding when someone isn't quite receptive to me talking to them. That could be why, because their anxiety is so much different.
Mm-hmm.
And so one example that I always use for that is, with COVID-19, I'm kind of a shut-in myself. I stay home a lot as it is. 100% family guy. I like being with my family as much as possible. So um, a lot of people assume that when COVID-19 hits, it's like, well, a guy like me wouldn't care because I'm not going out very much. But it's kind of true. But at the same time, when I was having a tough day, I like to escape once in a while. I like to have that freedom to, go out somewhere and kind of reset, or just do my own thing. But not having that little escape through COVID-19 has more of an impact than people might realize. So um, just because you think someone's an introvert, or has that anxiety that prevents them from going outside and dealing with a lot of people, doesn't mean that COVID-19 has been easy for them, because they might have those limits in place. And
Yeah.
um, I think that the only way to beat that is through conversations like this, talking to people openly about exactly how anxiety and depression has affected them, because the stigma is different for everyone, how it holds them back, how a person develops depression
Mm-hmm.
is, or how it impacts them and hurts them, is completely different. And um, you know, all I can offer people, I tell people all the time, I'm not an expert in mental health, or depression or anxiety, but I do know my story. And if I can share my story with somebody, and it helps them kind of connect the dots on some of the things that they've done in their past, or that they're dealing with currently,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe it leads them to talking to somebody. And even if it's just talking to me further, and they realize, hey, I feel better, let's do this more. And I've been reaching out to a lot of friends through social media throughout COVID-19, just because um, sometimes hearing that friendly voice is enough to make someone talk a little bit and open up, and just break down that barrier. Because as much as you try to reach out to someone, it takes both people in that conversation to completely remove those barriers and kind of get that productive conversation going. So that's been my main goal through all this, aside from dealing with family craziness and all that fun stuff. But um, I don't know what else I have to say, but that's about it.